When Kathleen was 18 months old, her father stabbed her mother to death. Here is one of her diary entries in which she is talking about one of her deceased children, Laura. She refers to Laura as, quote, a fairly good-natured baby, and later writes, quote, thank goodness it has saved her from the fate of her siblings. I think she was warned. I am my father's daughter, end quote. Chilling. Hi there, I'm Misha, and welcome to my channel, All Things True Crime. In each video, I like to cover a serial killer's life from as early as I can through to their conviction and or death. One thing I like to do here before we walk through the crimes is to help us understand and see the entire picture. We should all hate serial killers. They're terrible people. There's no question about that. Everyone agrees. But I like to pull the curtain back and show you their traumatic childhoods and how they're often victims of extreme abuse and neglect, which in no doubt contributes to their future murderous nonsense. Nature versus nurture. When we look at their past, we can often feel so sorry for them as children and then feel such hate for them as adult, murderers. It's kind of fascinating, actually. So, it just goes to show how complex people and situations are. It's not cut and dry, black and white. It's very gray. We'd love to think that these dirtbags are just born with red eyes, trying to murder people like 8 months old or something. That'd make it pretty easy. But most of the time, they're born, sweet little babies and just crapped on by their parents, abused by every adult in their lives until they just finally snap. So, I'm not trying to make you sympathize with killers, I'm just trying to explore the complexity of the human condition as it relates to serial killers. If this is something you'd enjoy, please subscribe to my channel, All Things True Crime, so you'll be notified every time I upload. Kathleen Folbigg is born Kathleen Donovan on June 14, 1967. At around 18 months old, on January 8, 1969, her biological father brutally murders her mother by stabbing her 24 times. The day after the murder, he's arrested and sentenced to 15 years in prison and then is deported to Britain. As you can probably imagine, Kathleen is then declared a ward of the state after being classified as a neglected and destitute child, and she's immediately placed into foster care. Relatives tried to care for her at first, but were ultimately unable, saying she had severe temper tantrums, aggression, and crying fits outside of the ordinary for a toddler. It is believed by forensic psychiatrists that she was sexually abused by her father before he went to prison. Not long after being placed with her first family, she's removed and placed in a home called Badura Children's Home. After she turns 3, her situation deteriorates further, with reports concluding that she's a very disturbed little girl who becomes aggressive towards other children. A few months later, she's removed again, moved into what would become a permanent foster home. She's classified as a child with specific needs. As expected, she has no memory of her father murdering her mother, but experts believe her catastrophic early life experiences and disruption of attachments within a violent and abusive family origin deeply affected her psychology. In this foster family, she has 2 much older siblings. Her mother calls her cold and controlling. She becomes close to her sister, who testifies at her trial that she is capable of looking someone in the eye and lying outright to them. I mean, that's pretty sociopathic, right? Her report with the state mentions her having, quote, problematic sexualized behaviors as a very young child, end quote, and, quote, difficulty regarding her intellectual functioning, end quote. She proves to be domineering towards the other children and often a very difficult child. She's a loner at school, has feelings of social isolation, and trusts no one. Despite all this, she stays here until she's 15, at which time she leaves school and marries a man named Craig Folbigg. The year is 1987 or 1988. The records are a little conflicting. Their first child is born on February 1st, 1989. He is supposedly a noisy breather and is diagnosed from a young age as having a mild case of laryngomalacia. Apparently it's the most common cause of chronic stridor, or a harsh or grating sound that infants can make. Something to do with the upper larynx's cartilage, still soft and immature, which causes it to collapse during inhalation, which in turn causes airway obstruction and that grating noise that you hear. Typically, children outgrow this as that cartilage matures and everything. On the evening of February 20th, so kids like 19 days old, Kathleen the Crazy puts Caleb to bed in a nearby bedroom. He has a rough night, fussing from around midnight to 2 a.m. Big whoop. I mean, my wife and I have dealt with fussy babies from 1 p.m. to 7 a.m. the next morning. I mean, have you heard of colic? She supposedly discovers Caleb dead sometime in the night or early morning. He's 19 days old, as I mentioned. His death is attributed to cot death, or SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. She and her husband are, of course, utterly devastated at the loss, but they push onward, and on June 3rd, 1990, give birth to a baby boy named Patrick. This time, Craig stays home with Kathleen for the first 3 months to help care for her and the baby. Suspicious, anyone? I mean, no. I mean, maybe he just knows her and that she needs the help, and that's okay too. Just wondering here if he's being a good husband and father, or if he is worried or suspicious. On October 18th of 1990s, so it's a few months, 4.5 months, Kathleen puts Patrick to bed. Okay. Of course she did. Why would Craig have put him to bed? Later that night, Craig is startled awake to his wife's screams coming from the nursery. He rushes in to find her standing over the baby's bed. He sees that Patrick isn't breathing and begins performing infant CPR. He takes a second to call for an ambulance, and Patrick is taken to the hospital, where he is later diagnosed with cortical blindness and epilepsy. Cortical blindness is either partial or total loss of vision caused by damage to the brain's occipital cortex, usually caused by loss of blood flow. Congenital is caused by stroke, encephalitis, or meningitis, but that's not permanent blindness. So at the hospital, little Patrick is diagnosed with these two conditions, but the nearly life-threatening event he is seen for remains unexplained. 4 months later, he dies from seizures. On February 18th, 1991, Kathleen calls her husband at work and tells him their son died, saying, "It happened again." After this loss, the couple moves to Thornton, New South Wales, a suburb of Maitland. Kathleen gives birth to their third child, a daughter named Sarah, on October 14, 1992. She dies on August 29, 1993, at 10 months old. Once again, SIDS is to blame. Possible? Sure. Probable? No. In 96, they moved to Singleton, and here is a journal entry. Dated June 18th, 1996, Kathleen writes, and I quote, "I am ready this time, and I know I'll have help and support this time. When I think I'm going to lose control, like last times, I'll just hand the baby over to someone else, not feel totally alone. Getting back into my exercise after will help my state of mind, and sleeping whenever possible as well. I have learned my lesson this time." It's a little bit cryptic. Chilling. On August 7th, 1997, Kathleen gives birth to Laura. Here is a journal entry dated November 9th, 1997. Kathleen writes, quote, "Craig was pretty drunk Friday night. In his drunken stupor, he admitted that he's not really happy. There's a problem with his security level with me, and he has a morbid fear about Laura. I don't know, there's nothing wrong with her, nothing out of the ordinary anyway, because it was me and not me. I think I handle her fits of crying better than I did with Sarah. I've learned to, once getting to me, to walk away and breathe in for a while myself. It helps me cope and figure out how to help her. With Sarah, all I wanted was her to shut up, and one day she did." Would you say that? Of a loss? I don't know. I mean, she's clearly disturbed, but still. Another entry on January 28th, 1998, right around a month before Laura dies, Kathleen writes, "Very depressed with myself, angry and upset. I've done it, I've lost it with her. I yelled at her so angrily that it scared her. She hasn't stopped crying. Got so bad I nearly purposely dropped her on the floor and left her. I restrained enough to put her on the floor and walk away. Went to my room and left her to cry. Was gone probably only 5 minutes, but it seemed like a lifetime. I feel like the worst mother on this earth. Scared that she'll leave me now, like Sarah did. I knew I was short-tempered and cruel sometimes to her, and she left. With a bit of help. I don't want that to ever happen again. I actually seem to have a bond with Laura. It can't happen again. I'm ashamed of myself. I can't tell Craig about it since he'll worry about leaving her with me. Only seems to happen if I'm too tired. Her moaning, bored, whiny sound drives me up the wall. I truly can't wait until she's old enough to tell me what she wants. Girl is super disturbed, very inconsistent. Loving in one breath, hateful in the next. Yikes. She needs medication for sure. And, probably jail time for murder. Well, on March 1st, 1999, Laura dies at 18 months old. Here she's playing in their pool the day before her death. Once again, SIDS is to blame. SIDS. SIDS is real, but SIDS. As in the past, they call for an ambulance and they perform CPR until they arrive. Unfortunately, it's too late, and Laura's gone. Kathleen later describes her death as the result of a coughing fit she had in bed. I don't think so. Kind of a garbage excuse. Craig admits he had his suspicions, but couldn't really wrap his head around it until he discovered her journal entries. What he read made him sick to his stomach, and he immediately took it to the police. Before she's arrested for the deaths, she is reportedly seen rehearsing her story for trial and making sure she cries at the right times. Innocent? I don't think so. Also interesting that she's always the one that discovers them when they've died. How convenient is that? That's very convenient. So Kathleen is arrested April 11th, 2001. During the trial, Craig and Kathleen's foster sister are witnesses for the prosecution. The sister cites examples of Kathleen showing aggression towards the children and a drastic mood swing during Laura's funeral. Kathleen goes from crying to happy and laughing, enjoying the party. A neighbor recalls visiting them after the death of Kathleen, and she was not upset at all. No tears, no sadness, nothing. And when the neighbor asks her how this could happen, she replies, just like the rest of them. On May 21st, 2003, so a couple years later after her arrest, she is convicted of murdering her 4 children. 8-month-old Patrick, 10-month-old Sarah, 19-month-old Laura, and 19-day-old Caleb. And she is sentenced to 40 years behind bars, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The cause of death, they say, is smothering. In the years since her conviction, significant scientific advances have been made, and her lawyers have asked geneticists to take a look. So I've made this video before, but I'm remaking it because there's been an update. So these geneticists have begun digging into her background, her makeup, and this has resulted in doubts about her guilt, and a petition signed by many scientists has circulated asking for her release based upon their research, which they claim proves her innocence. These scientists claim to have uncovered a rare mutation in a gene shared by Kathleen and her daughters. It's called CALM2G114R and causes sudden death in infancy and childhood. The 2020 study claims these mutations all altered Sarah and Laura's heart rhythms and is a reasonable explanation for their deaths. It's reasonable doubt, right? Maybe so, but what about the 2 boys? Well, one maybe died from seizures, but the other, if only the girls share the mutation, then it kind of falls apart. But as the scientists continue investigating, they discover that the boys, Caleb and Patrick, carry a different rare genetic variant that has been connected to epileptic deaths in mice. One of the pediatric geneticists who signs this pardon petition says the evidence for natural death is stronger with the girls than the boys. On February 5th, 2005, upon appeal, the courts reduced her 40-year sentence to 30 years and her possibility of parole from 30 years to 25 years. Those that have signed the pardon petition include 2 Nobel laureates, the president of the Australian Academy of Science, and many other scientists from Australia and 8 other countries. In 2019, the petition failed and her conviction was upheld. She claims her journal entries were written from a place of blame, not from guilt of murder, but mom guilt that she couldn't have prevented the deaths, which, is plausible, right? Prison guards at the Silverwater Correctional Complex where she is being held call her manipulative. They say she manipulates other female inmates and attempts mind games with the guards. In 2017, it was reported that she assaulted a fellow inmate for taking a toaster into a cell, as it is a fire hazard. She punched the inmate in the stomach and then immediately asked the guards for the footage so she could watch it. Her lawyers claimed she wanted the footage because she was shocked, horrified, and embarrassed by what she had done. Are you freaking kidding me? That's garbage. Thankfully, the judge was like, this is ridiculous, and gave her a 4-month sentence for the assault. After the assault, she's transferred to Cessnock Correctional Center. In January of 21, during yet another transfer, this time to Clarence Correctional Center, not sure why she was transferred, she's assaulted and gets a black eye and some bruises from women who don't want the likes of her in their units. Good for them. Okay, so here's where it gets interesting. In March of 21, a petition signed by more than 100 scientists calls for her pardon by the New South Wales governor. On June 5th, 2023, she is granted a full and unconditional pardon. Genetic evidence published in 2020 supposedly supports that at least 2 of her children had those genetic mutations that predisposed them to sudden cardiac death. The other 2 children carried 2 potentially lethal genetic mutations in a gene linked to early onset lethal epilepsy in mice. That's hard. Coincidence? I think so. I don't find the evidence used to exonerate her compelling enough. I guess they're just looking for probable cause, though. Reasonable doubt, right? So, but on the other side, if she is innocent, I'm glad she was released. If she's guilty, it's a shame she was released. These types of situations are unique and unclear, right? Well, that's a wrap for this episode of Serial Killers. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel, All Things True Crime, so you won't miss my next video. The next episode of Serial Killers is all about Dennis Rader, known as BTK, an American serial killer who bound, tortured, and murdered. There is a pretty significant difference there. 10 people from 1974 to 1991. He seemingly disappears for around 13 years and resumes taunting police in 2004 with a planned murder date of October 2004 and a target already identified for slaughter. Yikes. It's a unique story with a lot of twists and turns, creepiness, and a fair amount of luck for investigators that eventually seal the fate of this evil scumbag over 30 years after his first murder and 13 years after his last. This is Serial Killers. Until next time, stay safe.